Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I always thought I knew everything there was to know about my grandfather, Staff Sergeant Edward "Eddie" Greaves. He passed away in 1997 when I was 12 years old. I remembered him as the soft-spoken man who spent most of his time in the garage, fixing old radios, humming Glenn Miller tunes, and sipping black coffee from a chipped enamel mug with the 94th Infantry Division insignia printed on it. My father never talked much about Eddie's service in World War II, and whenever I asked, all I got was a tired shrug and something like, "Your grandpa saw some things. Best let them lie." It wasn't until the summer of 2023, when I was helping clean out my parents' house in Allentown, Pennsylvania, that I stumbled across the trunk. It was shoved all the way into the corner of the attic beneath some old insulation rolls and military-issue canvas tarps, rusted shut and stamped with faded black stenciling. SSGT Edward Greaves, 94th INF, Divey, US Army. It looked like something out of a museum. I pried it open using a flathead screwdriver and brute force. Inside were the usual heirlooms, a few folded uniforms, a woolen army blanket, dog tags, some yellowed ration cards. But at the bottom, beneath a stack of brittle Stars and Stripes newspapers, was a thick, leather-bound notebook wrapped in oilcloth. Tucked into its cover was a folded map of Western Germany and a faded black and white photo of 4 soldiers standing in front of a half-destroyed chapel. I didn't know it then, but opening that notebook would unravel a part of history that had been hidden for decades. A forgotten patrol, a destroyed village scrubbed from maps, and a mission that would come to haunt me just as it had haunted him. The first entry was dated March 3rd, 1945. The Battle of the Bulge had officially ended weeks earlier, but scattered German resistance still lurked in the forests of the Saarland region. The Allies were pushing toward the Rhine, and the 94th Infantry Division, known as the Ghost Corps, had been conducting reconnaissance patrols in the Siegfried Line's southern sectors. March 3rd, 1945. Just got orders from Lieutenant Alden. We're to lead a deep recon patrol through a patch of forest near Rellingen-Siersburg, northeast of Saarlouis. Objective: verify reports of Wehrmacht reoccupation of the abandoned village of Herrhausen. No such village appears on the map, but locals insist it exists. Says it was erased in '39 by some SS unit. Sounds like ghost stories. I froze. Herrhausen. I had never heard of it, and I knew the area. My wife's family was from that region of Saarland. I googled it on my phone right there in the attic, using every spelling variant I could imagine. Nothing. Not even a footnote. The next entries read like a mission log, written with the same mechanical precision I remembered from his workbench instructions. He noted terrain, weather, troop positions, weapon loads. It was all technically precise. Standard issue Thompson M1A1 submachine gun, 530 round stick mags, sidearm Colt M1911A1, 1 frag grenade. Rations were K-type. They carried SCR 300 field radios. His squad consisted of 5 men. Lieutenant Alden Marks, 25, from Syracuse, New York. West Point grad, fluent in German. PFC George Redding radio man, 20, from Columbus, Ohio, amateur cartoonist. CPL Leon Habersham, bar gunner, 22, from Montgomery, Alabama, former steel mill worker. Pattert Michael Mick Carraway, 19, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, medic in training. Sergeant Edward Greaves, squad lead, aged 26 at the time. March 4th, 1945. Departed base camp near Ittersdorf under fog cover. Reached the tree line near Kanzem by 7:30. Snow half melted. Mud bogging boots. Civilians say nothing grows in that forest. Old women made the sign of the cross when we mentioned Herrhausen. Redding joked we were walking into a hexed ghost village. Carraway didn't laugh. That night, I sat in my study, notebook on my desk, flipping through entries that detailed what should have been a routine patrol. But something was off from the beginning. The deeper they pushed toward the coordinates given, somewhere near what is today the border of Saarland and Rhineland-Palatinate, the stranger the entries became. Found remnants of cobbled road beneath underbrush. Lieutenant Marks says it's older than any paved track in the region, possibly Roman. Trees change beyond this point. Dense spruce canopy, no birds, wind dropped off completely. Redding's radio cut out intermittently, static, then gibberish in German, not coded, almost sounded wrong. Carraway swears he heard someone whisper his name from the trees. By 17 o'clock hours, they reached what remained of Herrhausen. I traced their movements using the WWII era map and cross-referenced with modern Google Earth. Nothing matched. The coordinates led to a featureless patch of forest southwest of Greimerath. Herrhausen exists, or did. We found a village square, half buried under moss and roots, buildings still standing in some places. Timber warped and blackened like they'd been burned decades ago. No signs of shelling, no craters, chimneys collapsed inward. Old Nazi propaganda posters on walls, faded and torn. One showed a black sun symbol, which Lieutenant Marks said was associated with SS occult divisions. This was when I first paused, rubbed my eyes and wondered if my grandfather had been losing his mind out there. But the language was clinical, cold, consistent, no poetic rambling, no exaggeration. In the square, they found something he simply called the stone, a tall, obelisk-shaped basalt structure engraved with runes and SS lightning bolts. The squad set up a perimeter in one of the intact structures, a charred schoolhouse. They made camp, waiting for orders. That night, things went bad. Carraway vanished during his watch. No sounds, no struggle. He was seated by the window one moment, then gone. His boots still there. No tracks outside. Radio scrambled again. Heard breathing. Definitely not Redding's voice. Lieutenant Marks retrieved his service sidearm. We found claw marks on the interior walls. 3 long gouges. Wood splintered. I stopped reading. The air in my study felt heavy, like the room was watching me. I reminded myself this was probably a psychological breakdown recorded by a man pushed to his limits in wartime. PTSD before we even had the name for it. Still, I couldn't stop reading. By morning, they tried to leave Herrhausen. The next several entries, shaky, sometimes smudged, suggest they couldn't. The road they came in on had vanished. The trees weren't the same. They circled back, but always returned to the same square. March 5th, Lieutenant Marks ordered Redding to climb a pine tree for recon. He got maybe 20 feet up before he froze and screamed. We pulled him down. He kept repeating, "It's not forest, it's hollow." He kept clawing at his ears. Later, he cut his own palm open and used the blood to draw symbols in the dirt. Habersham knocked him out cold. We're sleeping in shifts now. I'll stop here for now. That was the first third of the notebook, and already it was turning into something much darker than I'd expected. I knew now that whatever happened to them in those woods wasn't part of any official mission report. I checked with the US Army Center of Military History. No mission was ever recorded in Herrhausen. No records of lost personnel on March 5th, 1945. It was as if the whole patrol had been scrubbed. I spent the next 3 days poring over digitized war diaries, regimental logs, division movements, anything I could get my hands on. I even contacted a researcher at the National Archives in College Park who specialized in lost or redacted WWII missions. I didn't tell her the whole story, just that I was looking into undocumented patrol actions by the 94th Infantry Division around Saarlouis in early March 1945. She confirmed what I already feared. There were unexplained dead zones in the documentation. Patrols logged going in, but no corresponding return data. She said it wasn't uncommon that late in the war, with communications failing and units leapfrogging across rivers and through forested sectors. But what struck her as odd was the complete absence of even casualty tallies for a 3-day window in that region. That notebook, however, was undeniable. I'd return to it each night like a compulsion. I didn't believe in curses or ghosts or any of that nonsense growing up, but something about my grandfather's notes was starting to peel at the edge of my rational mind. There was a consistency to his writing, a clarity under pressure that didn't match any signs of mental collapse. He was documenting, not unraveling. The next entry resumed at dawn, March 5th, 1945. Night passed without further loss, but none of us really slept. Redding awoke before first light and vomited blood. We think it's stress, maybe a ruptured ulcer. Habersham's convinced the air is toxic, keeps saying it tastes like old copper. Marx took watch. I stayed near the radio and kept trying to reach the forward listening post in Searsburg. All I got was a burst of static and then something odd, Morse code. I had to pause there. My grandfather wasn't fluent in Morse, but the transcription was correct. I ran it through a translator and stared at the result, Mirza logs. It didn't make any sense at first, not English, not German. I wondered if he had misheard it, or if the transmission had been corrupted by interference, but the combination stuck in my head like a splinter. Back in the notebook, the situation continued deteriorating. 9:30 hours. Marx ordered a full sweep of the square. Found more collapsed buildings, what looked like an apothecary and a butcher's shop, both reduced to stone frames. No bodies, no bones, just a smell, earthy, like root rot mixed with ash. Redding refuses to carry his radio now, says the signal speaks to him in dreams. I'm starting to believe he's hearing something real. It's not just static anymore. This was when the tone of the notebook began to change. Not just fear, paranoia. Descriptions became sharper, more fragmented in places. His normally clinical precision started bleeding into abstraction. Still, he noted everything he saw. The presence of soot on rooftops, despite no recent fires. Moss growing in perfect concentric circles. Wooden beams that snapped without any external pressure. He claimed time moved oddly, watches running out of sync, compass needles spinning sporadically. The next major event came that evening. We found the chapel, or what's left of it. Blackened stone walls, stained glass shattered. Inside was something else. The altar had been carved with the SS Totenkopf, Death's head, and behind it, painted in faded red, a circular symbol, concentric rings, a black sun at the center, same as the stone in the square. Lieutenant Marx says it's real. He saw it once in a briefing. Wewelsburg Castle, a cult division of the SS, Himmler's obsession. Habersham refuses to enter the building again. I had to put the notebook down after that paragraph. The black sun, or Schwarze Sonne, was a real symbol, tied to the SS Ahnenerbe and their interest in arcane history, runes, and occult mythology. Wewelsburg Castle was Heinrich Himmler's ideological center. He had it redesigned with that very symbol inlaid in marble in the North Tower floor. I verified all of it. The same symbol now appeared in a forgotten chapel in a village that didn't exist. Back in the notebook, the team had begun to splinter. March 6th, Redding is missing, just like Caraway. No struggle, no signs of flight. Left his rifle behind. We found him hours later, barefoot in the snow behind the chapel. He was whispering to the obelisk, pressing his bloody fingers against the runes. When we approached, he screamed so loud it split the silence like a shell burst. Lieutenant Marx struck him in the jaw to stop it. He won't speak now. The entries that followed came faster, more urgent, like my grandfather was writing during brief moments of calm between crises. He noted environmental changes, sunrise that came early or not at all, a permanent fog that settled over the square. He recorded hallucinations or visions that the remaining three of them began sharing. Habersham claimed to see shadowed figures walking just inside the tree line at night. Lieutenant Marx found a fresh boot print near the road they couldn't follow out. American issue, but pointed the wrong direction, as if someone was walking backward. Then came the final entry from the field. "We've decided to burn the chapel. Whatever is in that building, it's not a relic. It's a mouth, a speaker. Something speaks through it and draws the lost toward the center. We doused the pews in fuel from the spare jerry cans and set it alight. The fire wouldn't rise at first. Then it roared all at once, sucking air into the walls. The stone hissed. I swear I saw figures inside it, twisting, blackened. Marks was the last in. He made me promise to run. Said someone has to report what we found. I didn't argue. When the smoke broke the trees, I ran south toward the ridge. I didn't look back. I still don't want to. There were no more mission logs, no more tactical reports. The rest of the notebook was personal reflection, written weeks or maybe months later. My grandfather described being found near Merzig by an engineering unit from the 90th Infantry Division, alone, dehydrated and feverish. No records remain of his debrief. His official discharge paperwork listed non-combat injury and shell shock. I closed the notebook with shaking hands. Outside, dusk had fallen, and the cicadas were rising. I sat in silence for nearly an hour before I finally pulled out the map that had come with the notebook and laid it flat. He'd marked Herrhausen's position with a black grease pencil, an X barely visible anymore. I checked modern maps again, satellite, road atlases, geological surveys. Nothing matched. But the next morning, I found something. On a German military archival site, I stumbled across a scan of a 1938 Reichsamt map, pre-war, and used by the Wehrmacht. Buried near the region labelled Huttersdorf, in faint script, was the name Herrhausen. It was listed as a lumber village, population estimated at 140. There was a mark next to it, Abgesiedelt 1939, resettled, displaced, removed. The village was real. It had been wiped off the map, just not in the way I expected. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the digital scan, zooming in and out, comparing it to modern overlays and topographical layers. Something about it felt deliberately obscured. The name was handwritten in a thinner typeface than any of the others, almost as though someone added it after the fact. But it was there, sitting just a few kilometers southwest of Greimerath, near the forested slopes along the Prims River basin. And it wasn't just that the village had been forgotten, it had been erased. By the next morning, my decision was made. I booked a flight to Frankfurt, rented a car, and set my route. Frankfurt to Saarbrücken, then east toward the rural highlands between Lebach and Weiskirchen. I told my wife I was following up on some family war history for a potential book, which wasn't a lie. I just didn't tell her how deep it had gone, or that I was chasing ghosts across an ocean. By the time I reached the village of Huttersdorf, it was nearly dusk. The air was still and cool, the kind of quiet that settles in deeply wooded places where no highways cut through. I checked into a small guest house run by an elderly woman who spoke enough English to get by. She offered me schnitzel and told me her grandfather had worked in the region's lumber mills before the war. When I asked if she'd ever heard of Herrhausen, her demeanor shifted. She looked past me for a moment, hesitating. "Herrhausen?" she said. "Old name. Nobody goes there anymore. That forest isn't right." She didn't elaborate, just brought me a beer and changed the subject. The next morning, I set out on foot with the notebook, the map, and a modern GPS unit. I parked at the end of an old forestry road and followed a trail that paralleled the old Prims River tributary, heading roughly northeast. The deeper I moved into the forest, the more wrong it began to feel. I know how that sounds, subjective, unprovable, but I've spent time in a lot of forests. I've hiked the Shenandoah, camped in the Cascades, and wandered the Carpathians in Ukraine. This was different. The silence was not just deep, it was absolute. No birds, no rustling, just a low hum in the air, like the forest was holding its breath. The trees grew closer together as I climbed, the canopy thickening until it blocked most of the morning light. I used the coordinates my grandfather had scribbled beside the name Herrhausen and triangulated my position. Around noon, I found the first sign, A moss-covered stone wall barely a foot high, running parallel to what looked like an old sunken roadbed. It wasn't marked on any mod map, but it was there, just as he'd written. I moved slowly now, as if crossing a border into a place that had gone untouched for too long. With every step deeper into the overgrowth, it felt less like I was moving through a forest and more like I was entering something. A sealed memory, perhaps, or the echo of something older than the village itself. The brush underfoot grew thinner, but the trees were impossibly still. No birds, no insects, just the low rustle of dry branches shifting, not from wind, but as if something far away had moved through them hours earlier and the trees were only now reacting. Then I saw the first structure, a half-collapsed timber frame embedded into the hillside, stonework blackened and half-sunken. Its silhouette matched what my grandfather had sketched in the margin of one of his entries, the general store or butcher's shop. I stood in front of it, not daring to cross its crumbling threshold, and felt that same static pressure in the air he described. It was subtle, but real, like walking beneath high-voltage lines. Something hums just out of hearing range. The deeper I went, the more surreal it became. The village square emerged like a scar in the forest, a flat, unnatural break in the density of trees, paved in crooked, weed-choked cobblestones. The stone monument stood dead center, exactly as he wrote. I approached it, slowly, breath caught in my throat. The monument, really more of an obelisk, was pitch black, basalt or some other volcanic stone, slick with lichen and centuries of rain. Its sides were inscribed in symbols I didn't recognize, not German, not Latin, carved deep, like warnings in a language long lost. And at the center, unmistakable despite erosion, was the black sun. 12 rays, interlocked rings, a sigil of death disguised as power. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe minutes, maybe an hour. At some point, I felt a vibration beneath my boots, like the distant rumble of a train passing underground. It didn't stop. I stepped back, and the feeling faded. I stepped forward again, closer to the monument, and it returned, stronger. It was real. I backed away and circled toward where the chapel should have been, just beyond the square. The forest thinned unnaturally there, trees still standing, but bent inward, as if bowed towards something in reverence or fear. I pushed through a wall of dead vines and found the ruins. The chapel wasn't entirely gone. 3 walls remained standing, pitted by fire and time, but structurally sound enough to mark their purpose. Inside, I found what was left of the altar, just a raised slab now, blackened at the edges. Beneath it, the scorched impression of the black sun had been carved directly into the foundation stone. I knelt to examine it. That was when I noticed the ash. At first, I thought it was just soil, but it wasn't. It was ash, cold, but fresh. It hadn't been there when I entered the square. I swept some of it aside, and beneath it found what looked like claw marks etched into the stone floor. 3 long arcs gouged into the bedrock, just like the ones described in my grandfather's March 4th entry. I stood quickly, heart racing. My breath fogged in the air now, though the temperature hadn't dropped. Not really, just perception. My skin prickled with something old, something instinctual. Every hair on my arms stood up. Something was wrong with this place, and it wasn't just what had happened 80 years ago, it was still wrong now. As I turned to leave, I heard the sound. It wasn't a voice exactly, not words, but a low tone, like a resonant hum, rising from the stone beneath me. I froze. It didn't fade. It built, slowly, deeply, like pressure in the chest before a panic attack. I moved quickly, retracing my steps toward the square, refusing to look back. That's when I saw the figure. At the far end of the clearing, beyond the monument, half shadowed beneath the tree line, stood a man, dressed in dark clothing, still, watching. My mind raced. I thought maybe I had passed another hiker, someone exploring old ruins. But something about him stopped me cold. His stance was wrong, too stiff, too balanced, like he hadn't moved in hours. I took a cautious step forward and raised my hand. He turned, Not fully, just his head. And for a second, I thought I recognized the face, or thought I did. It was Redding. The same gaunt features from the photo, the same wide eyes, but aged and distorted, as if time had frozen and warped him into something else. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again, like a marionette being tested. Then, without warning, he stepped backward and vanished into the trees. I ran, back through the trail, back past the buried stone wall, down toward the car. I didn't stop until I saw the rusted forestry gate where I'd left the vehicle. The forest stayed silent behind me. Once inside, I locked the doors and turned the engine. The dash flickered twice before catching. The GPS came back online, as did my phone. I drove straight back to the guest house, packed my things, and left without saying a word. That night, I stayed in a larger hotel in Saint-Louis, unable to sleep, notebook open beside me. The charcoal letter my grandfather had hidden in the back cover kept replaying in my head. They were waiting for someone to come back, and they remember our blood. I was starting to believe him. Back in the States, I reached out to a friend of mine at the University of Chicago, a linguist who specialized in ancient Germanic inscriptions. I sent him photographs of the monument's runes, blurred but legible. A week later, he called me in the middle of the night. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "These aren't runes, not really. It's like a cipher. Something derived from Elder Futhark but corrupted. Are you sure these are real?" I told him I was. He asked me to send physical copies, so I did. Another week passed before he got back to me. "I think this is artificial," he said. "Constructed. Some of these symbols don't exist outside certain SS cult writings, and there's a pattern, repetition of a sequence, almost like a summoning phrase. Or containment." That word made my stomach drop. Containment. I began to wonder if the obelisk in Herrhausen wasn't meant to mark something, but hold something in. My grandfather had described the chapel as a mouth. What if it was more than metaphor? What if something had been sealed inside, intentionally? And if that's the case, had I broken it? I haven't been the same since returning. I hear things, nothing concrete, but I'll wake in the middle of the night to static from radios that aren't plugged in, the sound of boots in my hallway. My fingers go numb at random intervals, the same hand I placed on the obelisk. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that figure in the woods, still, watching. I've sealed the notebook in a fireproof lockbox and stored it with a contact I trust in Vermont. I don't want it in my house anymore. There's one last thing. A few nights ago, I received a brown envelope in the mail, no return address, postmarked from Frankfurt. Inside was a single black and white photograph, obviously old. It showed the village square in Herrhausen, but not in ruins, intact, alive, cobblestones clean, windows unbroken. The obelisk was new looking, not yet weathered, and standing in the middle were 4 men in US uniforms, my grandfather among them. Next to them was a 5th man, Redding. Only not quite. His features were just a little too pale, too stiff, and his eyes looked wrong. I don't know who sent the photo or how they had it, but on the back, in faded pencil, were 4 words. It never ended, still waiting. I've stopped digging. I've said enough, more than enough. I've told you the truth as I found it. If you're thinking of going to Herrhausen, don't. What they found in those woods didn't die in the fire. It just went quiet. And now that I've disturbed it, I don't think it's quiet anymore. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.